Tec Sounds presents EduTrends.
Welcome to the EduTrends, brought to you by the Institute for the Future of Education. This is a Tec Sounds podcast, the official podcast platform of Tecnológico de Monterrey. I am José Pepe Escamilla, Associate Director of the Institute for the Future of Education, and today's guest is Jane Swift, President of Education at Work. It's a pleasure to have you here, Jane.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have someone with a very diverse background. In your career, you have done several things. One of them is serving as governor of Massachusetts. So I'm curious about why you decided to dedicate this part of your life to education. What made you work in education?
That is, so for the same reason that I got into public service is the reason that I'm working in education. I come from a hardworking middle-class family in Massachusetts. And in our family, there was always this belief that turned out in my case to be true, that if you worked hard and studied hard, that you could really better yourself, that you could have a job that provided you with a career that was full of purpose, full of passion, where you could make a difference, both for your family and your own economic security, but also to make a difference in the world. And I went off to college, like many students do after their years of high school in the United States, and discovered that despite having very involved parents, the school system that I had attended wasn't as challenging and rigorous and hadn't prepared me as well for college as it had some of my peers who grew up in wealthier families. And so to make a really long story, because I'm old, a little bit shorter, I was inspired to get involved first in politics and policy, and then later working directly in the education innovation economy to create excellence at every level of education, so that the promise that we have in the U.S. that education for all provides opportunity, social and economic opportunity and mobility for all could become a reality.
That's a very interesting story. I can relate to that also because I'm a first generation in my family, and my parents come from we say low income background. They did a study until the 6th grade of elementary school. That's all they did. But in my family, it was always very important to better yourself, not to study and to work. So, but I didn't end up being the governor of Nueva Orleans.
Yeah. Well, but did you run? Because if you don't run, then you don't end up as governor.
You have less chances to win if you don't run.
Right.
I imagine. Thanks, Jen. Could you tell us about Education at Work? What's the mission and what are the kind of projects you're doing?
Sure. So our mission at Education at Work is fairly simple. We work with employers to support students, and we mainly work with students who are like me when I was in college, low and middle income college students. And what we are trying to do is to give them meaningful work that helps them to have the experience, the technical and soft skills that are necessary to get a good first job. Back when I went to school, and I just told you the story with my family, getting your degree and getting good grades was enough to help you find that good first job out of college. But today, as the world is just so reliant on technology, the dynamism of our economy, the velocity of change, that has made it a much different challenge for college students. For many of the best entry-level jobs that will help pay off that college education and what you have invested in it, you need to have, in addition to your college degree, some level of experience, some very specific skills, and certainly the soft skills that employers are looking for, the adaptability, the problem-solving, communication. And so what we try to do is to take work that's often required of students to help pay for their education and turn it into a career accelerator So we work with major Fortune 500 companies like Intuit, Fidelity Investments, banks, to give students that real world experience and to give them a leg up when they're entering the workforce.
Great. So what I understand is that you start working with students when they're still in college.
So what we do is we have many workforce shortages for skilled workers in the United States. Some of those are what I would call mid-skill jobs where you need some education, but not a college degree. Others require a college degree. So oftentimes Intuit is a great example. They have roles where people are Intuit does TurboTax, which is a tax filing software in the United States. I think they use it in some places abroad as well. Credit Karma, if you're trying to manage your own credit history and debt. They also have QuickBooks, which I'm sure is used around the world for small businesses that are managing their finances and their accounts. And so what Intuit has is customer support and help that they outsource to different organizations around the country. We're their first education partner. And so we hire college students on a part-time basis and train them with the same training that Intuit would use with their full-time employees. So if you're sitting today in the US and getting ready to file your taxes and you have a question, maybe you forgot your password. That's always one of the biggest questions. And you call into TurboTax support. You may talk to one of the students that we employ on behalf of TurboTax in Tempe, Arizona, soon to be also in Salt Lake City, Utah, and around the country because we have a broad presence. But we take these full-time jobs, and it's not really what we would suggest or recommend for full-time college students to work 40 hours a week. So we take these 40-hour-a-week jobs and we divide up the hours and hire students in a part-time role, but still fulfill all of the needs. So if Intuit was going to hire 25 full-time employees, we'll hire 57 or 58 college students to fill the same level of need. But they're doing the exact same work. We call it mid-skill work. And then they have training opportunities within existing Intuit resources to become more skilled. And so one of the things that Intuit is always looking for are folks that not only can help you find your lost password or where you put how you get back into your account, but can they be helpful to you in doing your tax preparation? And as it turns out, there are all sorts of levels that are lower than needing a college degree, but that you can then progress even when you have your college degree to a more senior level. And so students can work with us. They can begin in that product expert role. They can do additional training if they'd like and really launch their tax and accounting career while they're still in college and really accelerate their path to professional success.
It's a very interesting path that you have, pathways that you have made for these students. So I understand that they are paid because you said they're hired. My other question will be, I'm sure that they develop these many learning points and soft skills because it takes you from the classroom to the real world, and that's where you really develop those skills that are also important. That I don't like to call them soft skills. I always call them power skills because they are so powerful. But my question will be: Is this acknowledged in the curriculum? So it's there are some credit hours or whatever they get from this work?
So sometimes, not always. It depends on the college or university that they're coming from. Some colleges and universities allow these kinds of paid internships to count toward course credit, and we love it when students. For most of my life, I've been a working mom. And so achieving two goals with one activity is basically what I live for, right? And pretty much the only thing that allows you to survive when you're a working parent. Everything has to count for twice. But for students, when we can work with a university to get them to give credit at the same time that we're paying for that work, that is the best possible outcome. But it's not always the case. And often what the university does work with us on is to be making sure that we recruit students who are the most interested in the career pathway that we've created. Oftentimes, employers will go to the university system first looking for workforce talent. And so the university isn't really set up to be an employer and a recruiter and a trainer like we are in the private sector. And so we become a preferred partner for them. So we're really an intermediary who can help between the company and the university, and where the university is particularly invested and wants to provide credit, we're all in, and we love that. Where the corporate partner is really invested and wants to upskill our students so that they can progress toward higher levels of salary and positions, we're all in on that too.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know that on Tuesday I was in a panel moderated by the president of EAFIT, which is a Colombian university, Claudia Restrepo. There was a delegation from Colombia here. And Antioquia, the capital is Medellin. Of Antioquia is relatively similar to Nuevo León, a very entrepreneur and industrious state, province. And one of the questions she asked me is, how can we make business industry partner in this kind of co-ops or internships or practices of the students? How we do make them be more willful to partner? And I think that the question could be phrased differently, because I think that in order to dance, we need two people. No, so we also need on universities and college to do something. So I will ask you this question to you: how do we get industries and business to work in this, and also how do we get the colleges and universities to work with this, so we can have more and more of these experiences for students?
So I think that real key is starting out by figuring out where their interests are aligned, but then being really honest together about where their capacity, the pace at which they work, and the way that they do things are not aligned. Because I think oftentimes there's this belief, you have all these college students, you're teaching them, you're preparing them for a job. Of course, you should be able to help us employ them in our, fast changing, we're not going to do tomorrow what we did yesterday, AI driven business. And frankly, a lot of times folks in the business world make certain assumptions about what is happening in our colleges and universities, or what college students are like. And it's oftentimes where those perceptions or beliefs are based not on fact or shared visions and goals, that things go awry. And so we found that in many cases using intermediary, and so my team is comprised not just of former politicians like me, but of folks who worked in both places, right? We have our higher ed experts and folks who've worked in administrations who understand why sometimes we have to follow certain processes when we're working with the university, and there are good reasons for that. And then we have folks who worked in the private sector side who understand why they needed something yesterday that they only told you today that they needed, and what's driving those requests as well. And so by finding aligned interests and then making sure that you structure with reality, how you can work together effectively, and many times using an intermediary to do that work, particularly if you're going to do it at scale. I think whenever we ask any organization to do something that's outside of their main reason for existing, we start to get into trouble. And so surely universities are a pathway to a career, but they're also about learning and about lifelong learning and about certain academic interests. We have this great chart where we talk about, the number of things you need to get while you're in college. that will successfully allow you to transition in a job. And one is academic knowledge. We're not teaching anybody who wants to be an engineer at Education at Work all the complicated formulas about load and heat loss. I only know that because my dad is a HVAC guy. I just pulled that out. But my brother is a mechanical engineer. But that's about the depth of my knowledge, right? We need the college, right, and the engineering school to teach that. But when that engineering student needs to go to work in an office, you call them power skills. Sometimes we call them durable skills. I've heard them called human skills. There are things we do need to teach them. And oftentimes, some of these things some students know. I joke, if you had me for a mother, you might know more of them because I am on my daughters all the time. Like, you need to show up early. You need to make sure. But even now with my 3 daughters who are successfully launched, they'll call me when they have a particularly difficult issue. And I think especially with so many students working either hybrid or remote, you don't find those mentors sitting at the desk next to you. So how do I respond to that tricky email? Is this a time when I should keep working because I think I'm in the right, like doing the right thing? Or is this a time when I stop and go and ask for more support? Like all of those little things that happen when you're employing early career professionals is what we call them, or early career talent, are really a key talent and skill that we've developed, and folks who manage people new to the workforce manage, that are very different than teaching the basics of, or the not basics of, engineering, right? And that's really where we come in. We both train you for the job, but we train you how to do a job and how to advance in your career. So I think not oversimplifying, even though this isn't rocket science, and I can't tell you anything about how to teach rocket science, but making sure that, we really do give students all the information they need to be successful, particularly if their parents didn't work in a professional setting, right? And this is going to be the first time that they're in that type of setting. They might not know what to wear, right? They might not know how you present in that office. So those are all the little things that actually turn out to be big things that make a difference in your career.
So one of the things that you mentioned is, or you mentioned 2 things that I'm curious. No? So one of them is this support that we have to do to the students. No, so as you mentioned, maybe it's the same case of you. When I was a student at higher education, no one in my family has gone to higher education, and I had to learn how to be proficient here, how to move. Then I realized also that even the way I talk, the way I conjugated some verbs or some words were not correct Spanish. It was like a low-level Spanish considered in academia. So I have to learn that by myself. So I understood that part of the support that you do as an intermediary is to deal with these issues of reconstructing a support network that these students doesn't have, because they don't have this social capital. I don't know how to deal in their families.
So often they may not have the social capital, they may not have the experiences. And also the world of work is changing quickly, right? What's the proper etiquette on Zoom or on a streaming platform? How do you handle that kind of an interview? None of us had to do interviews on a streaming platform. Are you still supposed to dress up? Yes. And the answer is yes. But what do you still write a thank you note? Yes. The answer is yes. But there's all kinds of norms in a fast changing world that even those who have very supportive parents or caregivers can use some insights and need a place to go for resources. And that's what I hope.
And how do you manage that? How it works? It's like a organized training program, or is on a mentor basis? You ask a question.
So we have supervisors. The aim is to have 20 students to every 1 supervisor. And the supervisor is both there to check the quality of the work the student does, because helping them to understand that we're being measured against certain key performance indicators, and going back and checking in with them. And I'll tell you, the first time you ever go through a performance review when you're in a professional setting, that's different than getting back a graded paper, right? When somebody comes to you in person and says, okay, you did this well, but this needs improvement. So we do that level of coaching with them, which is a important skill and an important activity to learn about when you're in a professional setting. But we can also say to them, here's some other things we need to talk to you about. Maybe I'll use myself. I can be quite loud. So when I'm in an office setting, right, like using the headphones is important, making sure if I'm going to do do something where I'm talking to somebody, if I'm in a cubicle, maybe I go somewhere into a quieter corner. But we all have different personalities, right? I think I'm charming as can be, but it's a little bit loud at times, right? So, just helping students manage through those things. Everybody should be their authentic self, but we want you to be your best authentic self that is going to help you to be successful.
I am also loud, but I'm not as I'm ugly, so I come out sometimes as rude. But I try to not forget to smile, so that I don't freak out people. I wanted to go into the other part of what you said is scale, because you mentioned the word scale, and I'm interested on IFE. We are also interested in solutions that can scale. No, so and you also mentioned that the supervisors have 20 students. So when I think, wow, that's like a lot. Maybe it's not a full time, etc. So I wanted to ask you about some numbers. Now, how many students are you serving, and if you're being able to scale, and also what's the business model of this? Is supported by revenue, by donors, or who's paying for this?
So the direct service is completely supported by the corporation who hires these students for real jobs. In order to provide all the additional wraparound services, some of the soft skill training, some of the more intensive coaching, and to do some of the research around what's the most effective, we go out and seek philanthropic resources for those types of activities that are ancillary, but really critically important to our work. So largely through revenue, that's a business model. We have served almost 1,000 students this year. So in any given year and at any given day, we'll have several hundred students working for a variety of different clients in different geographies across the United States. So we've achieved a level of scale. I would like for us to be 10x the size that we are. And the reason for that is every time we advertise a job, we generally get 5 to 10 more qualified resumes from students than we have jobs to place those students in. And so we could grow much more than we are. We need more jobs, paying jobs to offer those students. But we also publish, because we're a nonprofit, we believe that there need to be many more organizations like us. So I speak quite freely about our model and how we do it. And when we have an evidence-based best practice, I write about it. We publish white papers. We talk about it because we think there need to be a lot more organizations like ours doing this work.
That's very important if you have the URL and you can share it here so that we can go to that place later to look for those white papers and experiences that you have here. So I understand that it's more on the side of getting more business and industry to commit to do this. In fact, it's a big commitment because you have to create spaces for those students to grow, pay them, and also have pay for the services that they get to grow. But I imagine that what they get is talent that is being trained that eventually they can hire, for them, and that has the particular skills they're looking for. So we talk about durable skills, power skills, soft skills, 21st century skills also. So I would like to ask you, on your experience, what are the most in-demand skills in the industry and business now?
So the employer committee, we just did a survey of about over 200 employers to try to get at exactly this. And unfortunately, there's not a single answer, except I'll give you some of the most important. But the single thing that was the most surprising is employers want to see these skills and how they're both developed and deployed in a work setting. So communication. Every employer knows that students are developing good communication skills in the classroom, but they're really interested in how those communication skills translate into their industry. So you can imagine communicating in a healthcare setting with a patient who's just been given a diagnosis is a very different kind of communication than presenting a paper in front of your classmates. Talking to someone, this is a real example, on their first days on the phone, someone called into our support line at Intuit, and the person had not filed their taxes and were late filing their taxes because there had been a murder in their family. That type of communication and how you communicate with someone to both solve their problem but be empathetic to their situation is very different than what you're encountering in the classroom. And so communication skills, but maybe in a little different way than we see it in a academic or social setting. Problem solving. Problem solving comes up all the time. Again, not like a math problem solving or an engineering equation problem solving, but I have this issue and I need to find out how I move forward in this particular situation. Critical thinking, judgment, those are things that we get from employers all the time. And then one that's actually very central to a lot of our work, customer service. How do you teach students to have this view, no matter what industry, no matter what role they're in, of, the person that I'm dealing with is my customer, and I have that outlook. And we have a article from Forbes that we shared, and that is on our website too, that I gave you our URL, with a lot of our students, that customer service is deeply valued among many different career clusters and many different employers.
Okay, the website is www.eaw, like education at work.org. No, so that's it. We will include it on the podcast text. So I will ask you a last question before we leave, and it's more like a recommendation for the future of I would say higher education. Also, what would you like higher education to be in the following, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, so that people that are hearing this podcast can take a look at your view of higher education and see how we change it?
So I think we all need to be lifelong learners, and we all need to be innovative, right? And have a growth mindset. And I think higher education has a huge role to play in that. And what I would say is they should embrace that by doing the core things that they do those in an innovative way. Try to figure out how to deliver knowledge in a more interesting, innovative, forward-thinking way. And then also think about the new needs that your students have and how you form innovative partnerships. You don't have to do it all yourself, but you do have to address all of the things that the people who pay for the education and the students, if they're different than the payer, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not, but that students will need to be successful. And certainly a job is one outcome, but the job is also an outcome that is designed to help you have a life of purpose and passion. That's what I've always wanted for my children through their education and their work. And I think it's what we should want for educators should want for every student who comes through their classroom or their hallway.
Well, with this, we finish our conversation. Thank you, Jane, for your time and sharing your insights of education at work and work-based learning projects that you do there. I am sure this conversation will provide great value to our audience, and I hope to see you soon.
I hope so too. I visited Monterrey when I was a lieutenant governor and had a wonderful time, and I promised I would come back sometime. I haven't made it yet, but there's...
We have to make it happen. We'll invite you.
Absolutely.
For more information, visit observatory.tech.mx/EduTrends podcast and ife.tech.mx. A special thanks to Tecnológico de Monterrey, the Institute for the Future of Education, and the Tec Sounds team. Tec Sounds producer Miguel Mejia. EduTrends producers Esteban Venegas and Cristian Igosa. Stay tuned and play Tec Sounds in your favorite podcast app for other great shows and content.